gig for the CIA. Who calls you for that?
Yeah.
You ever get one of those calls?
No.
No, I never got one of those calls.
And my agent never hit me with that.
I believe Erika Kirk was fully aware of and helped facilitate the plot to her husband. We're going to start by breaking down an interview that she did just 8 days after his...
Does anybody know anything about Charlie Kirk's parents? I just saw a video about this, and it had literally never occurred to me that no one is talking about. We have not heard from or seen footage of anybody other than Erika and the freaking vice president.
What if everything you've been hearing isn't actually the full story? Right now, the internet is going crazy over a narrative that sounds almost unbelievable. Claims about hidden plans, perfectly timed moves, and a situation that people are saying was never as simple as it looked. At the center of all this, you've got Joe Rogan's name being thrown around, along with Erika Kirk and Charlie's family. And suddenly, what started as a few questions has turned into something much bigger. But here's where it gets serious. The more this story spreads, the more it starts to feel real. Even if not, everything has actually been proven. And that's exactly how viral stories take over. Because once people start connecting dots, they don't just stop at what's confirmed. They start building their own version of events. They start asking questions like, why did certain things happen at specific times? Why were some people silent when everyone expected them to speak? And most importantly, who actually benefited from everything that happened? Now, when a name like Joe Rogan enters the conversation, everything changes. He's not just another voice. He's one of the biggest platforms in the world. So when he even talks about something, it doesn't stay small. It spreads fast. Millions of people hear it, clips get shared everywhere, and before you know it, the conversation turns into something much bigger than what was originally said. But here's the part most people are missing. There's a huge difference between what is confirmed, what is being discussed, and what people are choosing to believe. And when those three things get mixed together, audit creates a story that feels complete, even when it's still missing key pieces. This situation didn't just appear out of nowhere. It built up slowly. At first, it was just small observations, people noticing details, questioning certain moments, pointing out things that didn't fully add up to them. Nothing major, just the kind of conversations that happen online every day. But then, something changed. Those questions didn't fade away. They started growing. More people joined in, more theories started forming, and those individual opinions slowly turned into a shared narrative, one that people kept repeating again and again. And once a narrative starts repeating, it gains power. Because repetition creates belief, and belief turns speculation into something that feels like fact. That's exactly what's happening here. What started as curiosity has now turned into a full-blown storyline, one where people are trying to piece together a version of events that makes sense to them, even if they don't have all the information. And then comes the biggest turning point, Joe Rogan being linked to it. Because once his name got attached, the whole situation leveled up. Suddenly it wasn't just random internet talk anymore. It felt like something important. But here's the truth that gets lost in all the noise. Talking about something is not the same as confirming it. Rogan didn't come out with verified proof of some hidden plan. He didn't present documents or confirmed evidence. What he did, like he usually does, was question things, react to discussions, and talk about what people were already saying. But once that hit social media, everything changed. The clips were shortened. Titles were exaggerated, context started disappearing, and suddenly, it wasn't Joe Rogan discussing a situation. It became Joe Rogan exposes shocking truth. That's where the shift happens. Because now people aren't just hearing a conversation, they're hearing a conclusion. And once people believe a conclusion, they start looking for evidence to support it, even if that evidence isn't fully verified. This is how the internet builds a story. It starts with a question, turns into a theory, becomes a narrative, and eventually feels like reality, even when the truth is still unclear. And that's why this situation is blowing up right now. Not because everything is confirmed, but because it feels like something bigger is hiding underneath, and people are trying to figure out what that is. Now, here's where the story really starts to change tone, because it didn't just grow randomly, it shifted at a very specific point. At first, people were just asking basic questions. Nothing extreme, just curiosity about timing, about who was present, about who wasn't. But then those questions started getting more detailed. People began going back, rewatching clips, analysing interviews, and paying attention to small details that normally wouldn't stand out. And that's when the narrative started forming. Because once people start re-examining things with a new perspective, they don't just see what's there. They start looking for what might be missing. They begin asking deeper questions like, why did certain moments feel controlled? Why did some responses seem prepared? Why were certain people not visible when you would expect them to be? And this is where things begin to feel different. Because now it's not just about what happened, it's about how it happened. And once people focus on how, that's when theories start building fast. The internet began connecting timelines. People started lining up events, comparing statements, and trying to find patterns. And when you look at anything long enough, especially something emotional or complicated, it's easy to start seeing connections, whether they were intentional or not. That's how this situation started turning into something much bigger. Because instead of one moment being analysed, now everything connected to it was being pulled into the conversation. Every interview, every appearance, every detail, all of it started getting examined under a microscope. And once that happens, the story stops being simple. It becomes layered. And the more layers you add, the harder it becomes to separate what's real from what's assumed. At the same time, the emotional side of the situation played a big role too. When something serious happens, people don't just look at facts, they look for meaning. They try to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. And when clear answers aren't available, people naturally start filling in those gaps themselves. That's exactly what happened here. The lack of clear explanations didn't calm the conversation. It made it grow even more. Because silence or limited information often leads people to believe there's something being hidden, even when that might not be the case. And once that idea enters the conversation, everything starts getting interpreted differently. In actions that might have seemed normal before now look suspicious. Decisions that might have been routine now seem intentional. And timing that might have been coincidence starts to feel calculated. This is the turning point where a situation goes from unclear to controversial. Because now people aren't just observing, they're interpreting. And interpretation is where narratives really take shape. The more people interpret something, the more versions of the story exist. And eventually one version becomes the most popular. Not necessarily because it's proven, but because it makes the most sense to the most people. And once that happens, that version starts spreading faster than anything else. That's when the situation truly goes viral. Because now it's no longer just information being shared, it's a belief. And beliefs are much more powerful than facts when it comes to how fast something spreads online. So by the time Joe Rogan's name got pulled into all of this, the foundation was already there. The narrative had already been built. The questions had already turned into theories. His involvement didn't create the story. It amplified it. And once something gets amplified at that level, it reaches people who weren't even following the situation before, people who are hearing it for the first time, but hearing it as if it's already established. And that's how something goes from being a discussion to becoming something that feels like a hidden truth. This is where the story takes a darker turn. Because at this point, it's no longer just about what happened. It's about what people think might have happened behind the scenes. Once the narrative started gaining momentum, the conversation shifted from curiosity to suspicion. And that shift is powerful, because curiosity asks questions, but suspicion starts forming answers. People began looking at everything through a different lens. Instead of seeing events as isolated moments, they started seeing them as connected. Every detail became part of a bigger picture. Every decision started to look intentional. And every silence started to feel like it meant something. That's when the question changed. It went from, "What happened?" to, "Was this all planned?" And once that question enters the conversation, everything changes. Because now people aren't just analysing facts. They're trying to uncover motives. They start asking who had control, who had influence, who stood to gain something from the situation, unfolding the way it did. And even if there are no clear answers, the act of asking those questions makes the situation feel deeper than it might actually be. This is how perception starts shaping reality. Because when enough people believe there's something hidden, even normal actions begin to look suspicious. Timing feels too perfect, reactions feel too controlled, and the absence of clear explanations starts to feel like confirmation instead of uncertainty. That's the moment when a situation crosses the line from discussion into something much heavier. Because now people aren't just following the story, they're emotionally invested in figuring it out. And once emotions get involved, logic often takes a step back. The human mind wants answers. It doesn't like uncertainty. So when there are gaps, it fills them in. And those filled-in gaps can sometimes become stronger than the actual facts, simply because they make the story feel complete. That's exactly what's happening here. The combination of unanswered questions, strong opinions, and viral amplification has created a version of events that feels detailed and convincing, even though parts of it are still based on interpretation rather than confirmed information. And this is where the role of influence becomes even more important. When someone with a massive audience even entertains certain ideas, it gives those ideas more visibility. Not necessarily more truth, but more reach. And once something has reach, it becomes part of the mainstream conversation. That's why this situation feels so big right now. Because it's not just one group of people talking about it anymore. It's everywhere. Different platforms, different audiences, all discussing the same narrative from their own perspective. And when that happens, the story takes on a life of its own. It evolves, it grows, and sometimes it moves further away from the original facts. But here's the most important thing to understand in all of this. Just because something feels real doesn't mean it's fully proven. And just because a story makes sense doesn't mean it's completely accurate. That doesn't mean people are wrong for questioning things. It just means there's a difference between asking questions and accepting conclusions. Right now, we're in that space where both are happening at the same time. People are questioning, but they're also concluding. And that's what's making this situation so intense. Because until there are clear, verified answers, everything else exists in that grey area. The space between fact and interpretation. And that's the space where viral stories grow the fastest. Now, here's the part most people don't realise. The reason this story isn't slowing down has very little to do with whether it's proven or not, and everything to do with how people feel about it. Because once a story reaches this level, it stops being just information and starts becoming something people want to believe or want to understand. And that's where power comes in. Not just power in the sense of people involved, but power in how narratives are built, shaped, and spread. When people think something bigger might be going on behind the scenes, it creates a sense of urgency, a sense that they're uncovering something hidden. And that feeling is addictive. It makes people keep watching, keep reading, keep sharing. Because nobody wants to feel like they're missing out on something important. That's exactly why this situation continues to grow. It's not just about the names involved. It's about the idea that there could be more underneath. And once that idea exists, it fuels everything. Every new clip gets analysed, every old moment gets revisited. Every detail gets turned into potential evidence, even if it's not confirmed. This is how viral cycles work. The more people talk about something, the more visible it becomes. The more visible it becomes, the more people assume it must be important. And the more important it feels, the more people continue talking about it. It's a loop. And once that loop starts, it's very hard to stop. That's why even without solid proof, this story keeps moving forward, because it's no longer being driven by facts alone. It's being driven by attention. And attention is one of the most powerful forces online. Now add in the idea of control. When people feel like information might be limited, controlled, or incomplete, they react strongly. They don't like feeling like they're only seeing part of the picture, so they push harder. They dig deeper. They question more. And sometimes, that reaction creates even more speculation. Because the less clarity there is, the more space there is for interpretation. And interpretation is where stories expand. That's exactly why this situation keeps evolving. It's not standing still. It's growing with every new opinion, every new theory, every new person who adds their perspective to it. And the more perspectives there are, the more complex the story becomes. At this point, it's not just one narrative anymore. It's multiple narratives layered on top of each other. Some based on facts, some based on assumptions, and some based purely on how people feel about the situation. And when all of that mixes together, it creates something powerful enough to keep going, even without clear answers. But here's the final truth that brings everything together. Just because a story spreads fast doesn't mean it's fully understood. Just because something feels deep doesn't mean all the pieces are known. And just because people believe something doesn't automatically make it reality. Right now, this situation sits in that exact space, the space where attention is high. Emotions are strong, and clarity is still developing. And until that clarity comes, the conversation isn't going anywhere. So after everything we've just broken down, here's what it really comes down to. This situation isn't just about one claim, one person, or one moment. It's about how stories are built, how narratives spread, and how quickly perception can turn into belief. What started as a few questions turned into a full conversation. That conversation turned into theories. And those theories turned into a viral narrative that now feels bigger than the original situation itself. And that's the part most people overlook. Because once a story reaches this level, it's no longer controlled by facts alone. It's shaped by how people interpret those facts. It's shaped by what people think makes sense. And sometimes, it's shaped by what people want to believe is true. That doesn't mean everything being said is wrong, but it also doesn't mean everything being said is proven. And that balance is important. Because in situations like this, it's very easy to get caught up in the momentum, to see something repeated over and over again, and start accepting it without stepping back and asking, where did this actually come from? What is confirmed? And what is just being assumed? Right now, we're in that exact moment. A moment where the story feels complete, but might still be missing key pieces. A moment where the narrative feels strong, but is still evolving. And a moment where people are trying to separate what's real from what's simply being amplified. And that's why this conversation isn't ending anytime soon. Because until there are clear, verified answers, people are going to keep asking questions. They're going to keep analysing. They're going to keep trying to connect the dots, whether those dots truly connect or not. And that's the reality of how viral stories work today. They don't wait for full confirmation. They don't slow down for clarity. They move fast, and they grow even faster. So the real question isn't just about what happened. It's about how much of what we're seeing is based on fact, and how much of it is being shaped by perception. Because once you understand that difference, you start looking at everything a little differently. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Not just what people are saying, but why they're saying it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this is just another viral story that got blown out of proportion? Or do you believe there's actually more going on behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts below, because this conversation is far from over.